Hello, my name's Tommy, and I am delighted to welcome you to Podcast Assemble. You know the drill by now. There's so much content out there, whether it's in cinemas, or streaming, or even podcasts. And there's only so many hours in the day. It's hard to know what should get your valuable attention. So I created this series where I watch the first episode of a thing, so you don't have to. Based off the initial impression, I tell you whether you should watch it or not. That's it. That's simple. Well, it is a little reductive. If you're a fan of The Last of Us video game, like myself, you've no doubt seen the show by now. However, if you've seen the trailers, or even the hype surrounding the show, and are in any way still on the fence, this is the video for you. HBO has a long history of creating simply phenomenal television. From The Sopranos to Game of Thrones, they just have a knack of making crazy engaging content. And The Last of Us is the latest off the conveyor belt. And oof, have they given themselves a lot to live up to. Based off the critically acclaimed 2013 video game of the same name, HBO really have their work cut out for them. The game breaches the gap between cinema and gaming, telling a truly human story, and one which simply couldn't be reduced to a 2-hour plus movie runtime. When it was announced that Last of Us was coming as a show rather than condensing, refining, and inevitably cutting up the story, I have to admit, I was relieved. But then again, the curse of the video game adaptation is a real thing. So with that in mind, I watched the first episode of the HBO live-action The Last of Us. Let's talk about if you should too, and this will be non-spoilers. On our Podcast Assemble, myself and my co-host DL deep dove the games. Check out our episode linked below. If you've played the video game, you may not be shocked by anything which takes place in the first episode, as it begins in the relative normality back in 2003. 2003. Better time. Before an outbreak of a fungal virus, for which we have no cure, quickly spreads and consumes much of the world's population. Just don't say zombie. After a time jump, we're thrust back into a world left in ruins, with only very small communities surviving by closing themselves off to the outside world. Lawlessness is rampant, and those in charge take advantage of the limited resources, causing uprisings and leading to the introduction of those rebelling, the Fireflies. The episode follows Joel, a resourceful, capable, somewhat reluctant hero who was left devastated by the outbreak. His primary motive is keeping his family safe, taking no sides. We find out that his brother Tommy is living in a distant community, and with communications options being limited, considering technology suffered in their outbreak, Tommy's recent silence leaves Joel fearing the worst. Joel decides to take action and head out into the infected world to find Tommy. But before he does, he's charged with moving Ellie, a mysterious young girl who's being held captive by the Fireflies. In many respects, The Last of Us focuses less on the horrors of what comes with a zombie-like infestation, and more on what's at its core, a reluctant father figure narrative. The adventure forces the unlikely team to face the worst of not only those suffering from the effects of the outbreak, but also the worst of humanity. Feels like humans being worse than monsters is kind of a regular occurring motif on this series. The Last of Us popularity, in many ways, blossomed from its deeply flawed characters. In the series, the aforementioned Joel is being played by Pedro Pascal, a man made world-weary by the outbreak, and one who keeps the emotions close to his chest. Pascal's an inspired choice to play Joel. There's little the man can't do on the big or small screen. His performance in the criminally overlooked Nick Cage venture, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, highlights his versatility. And this show harnesses the deeper, darker, more brooding aspects of his acting chops. And also, jumping into the shoes of renowned voice actor Troy Baker is no easy feat. But the challenge I see is ensuring the cast around Pedro matches up. How do you cast those around a man who literally has never been in a bad show?
I'm a television personality.
Well, luckily, as I mentioned, this is HBO after all. Though we don't get a huge amount of her in the episode, another key player is Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey, another Game of Thrones alum and fan favourite. Ellie's anger at the world is only matched by her bad attitude. In all honesty, having only seen small snippets of Ramsey in Game of Thrones, I wasn't so sure how I felt about the casting. Yes, she's a badass, no doubt, but Ellie has a juxtaposing naivety and softness to her, and I've just not seen that yet in the young actor. However, the evolution of Ellie and the relationship between Joel are core to the story, and it's one that I'm excited to see explored. Now, the rest of the characters we're introduced to in the first episode are also excellently cast. Firefly leader Marlene, played by Merle Dandridge, is actually played by the video game voice actress, while Anna Trov encapsulates beautifully Tess, Joel's companion and equally world-weary survivor. I think HBO have really nailed the cast for the most part. But does it add to the story, I hear you scream? The short answer is yes. The opening episode was given around an hour and 20 minutes to set the stage, and it uses the almost feature-length runtime to add new depth to the story and flesh out characters who in the game are fairly one-dimensional. Now in media, the term fridging refers to a usually female character who is killed off early on in the usually male hero's journey to provide motivation for their evolution. It's quite an outdated trope and one which the video game leans on heavily in its opening scenes, to its detriment. I'll not spoil anything here, but the show uses its runtime to flesh out previously underutilized characters and give them more agency. It's a refreshing inclusion that makes the journey all the more personal. Outside of that, I'd say the show mostly sticks to the beats of the game, which, by the way, is in no way an issue. The world the show is building matches the game in all of its bleak ruthlessness, presenting a truly interesting spin on a very familiar genre. One thing I do wonder, though, is if they'll add and build some new elements to the lore of The Last of Us as the show continues. If the show turns out to be a blow-for-blow retelling of the game, it could lose the interest or attention of those who know where the show's headed. So is it worth your time? Now, coming into this as a fan of the source material, with higher expectations than the Viper has confidence in his fighting skills, I honestly feel the first episode does a phenomenal job of assuaging any fears I had. The cast really hit out the park, while the slow creeping anxiety the world is building truly exemplifies the best of the video game. This could actually be the one that breaks the video game curse. But should you, yes you, watch this thing, this Last of Us thing? Absolutely. That's it. Go watch it. Damn, I needed a catchphrase. What we want to know is, what do you think? Did the critical reception make you want to watch the first episode of The Last of Us? Do you think it'll be a hit? Or will it not live up to its promise and fail like the Viper? Let us know in the comments below. I love it when you guys keep it civil. While you're there, feel free to drop us a like, share, and subscribe. We also have that podcast I mentioned, Podcast Assemble. Why not join us for some more geek content? Thanks for popping by, guys. Tally ho!